Divisional playoff run is finished and the coaching carousel has begun moving. So fasten your seatbelts. Tom Pelissero reports that Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is going to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. So it's going to be Ben Johnson paired with Caleb Williams. We'll see if that goes better for Caleb Williams than the old regime. Johnson obviously made life a lot better for Jared Goff and company, and the downstream effect of that, the effect in the wake of this hiring is, what are the Detroit Lions going to do? There's a reason that teams these days have their offensive coordinator and their head coach be the same person. I know that some people wonder why the 49ers have done that. Well, when the inevitable brain drain does come to a successful team, that means that at least you keep your play caller. And now the Detroit Lions, who obviously have a quarterback who's been reliant on his play caller in Jared Goff, are going to have to find somebody to replace Ben Johnson. Further down the coaching carousel, the Saints and the Jets are both interested in Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. So Dan Campbell of Detroit is probably going to lose both of his coordinators who were such important parts of that staff. Campbell's a CEO type. He's not calling the offense, nor is he calling the defense. And Aaron Glenn, who dialed up some of those really, really effective blitzes to get the Lions to the 1 seed, which they eventually blew in the divisional round. It looks like the Saints and the Jets are both interested in him. The Jags remain interested in hiring Robert Saleh for their head coaching position. They've already interviewed Saleh, and this is what ties back to the 49ers, because the 49ers seem very zeroed in on Robert Saleh. Why? Because Dennis Allen, another defensive coordinator candidate floating around out there, is expected to be Ben Johnson's defensive coordinator with the Jets. Dennis Allen, formerly the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, was fired, one of the most experienced defensive coordinator candidates on the circuit. The 49ers, though, have not interviewed him, even though he is a 4-3 guy, because it seems they're putting a lot of eggs into the Robert Saleh basket. So Allen headed to the Bears in all likelihood, while the Colts are going to be hiring another one of the very experienced defensive coordinator candidates that is available out there, and that is Lou Anarumo, fired by the Bengals. Probably he's going to be joining Shane Steichen's staff in Indianapolis. So the Ben Johnson move to the Chicago Bears, reported by Tom Pelissero, might have been the first domino that was needed to drop to get this entire coaching carousel moving. I know 49ers fans are probably freaking out now that they see some of the experienced names out there going to other places. I know I talked a lot about Dennis Allen and his potential fit with the 49ers, but I only talked about Dennis Allen if the 49ers would not be able to get Robert Saleh. And Saleh is still technically on the table for the 49ers. We'll see how the head coaching interview process wraps up. Saleh's interviewed with 3 teams, most recently the Cowboys, the Jags before that, and then before that on Tuesday, Robert Saleh underwent his first head coaching interview of the entire cycle. Well, actually, I think it was the Jags were first on Tuesday, then the Raiders on Thursday, followed by the Cowboys on Saturday. But it was 3 interviews in 1 week for the 49ers former defensive coordinator, who went on to be the head coach of the New York Jets, who the 49ers hope to land as their DC again. It's the hire that would make the most sense, and that one is still available. There is speculation that the 49ers have a handshake deal with Robert Saleh. They've offered him a ton of money. I don't know what the offset language on his contract with the New York Jets looks like, but all of that is worth considering as we try to figure out what the 49ers are going to do next. Let's take a look at the 49ers roster as it stands right now, because that also includes the head coaching interviews that have happened for San Francisco. Well, not head coaching, the defensive coordinator interviews and the special teams coordinator interviews that have happened. I've listed them all down here. This not too hard to keep you updated because we haven't had much room or much reports of new interviews. It's Deshae Townsend and Robert Saleh on the defensive coordinator side. Chris Tabor, Jet Modkins, and Chris Banjo have been the special teams coordinator interviews. And I guess we could put Brandon Staley in on the defensive coordinator side, because Brandon Staley is the one internal candidate whom Kyle Shanahan said that the 49ers would talk to. Now, one thing that I don't understand is this antipathy toward Brandon Staley. Not saying that he's the favorite. I think the 49ers would most like to hire Robert Saleh. Brandon Staley comes from the Vic Fangio 3-4 background. That would require a change of fronts for the 49ers. But people are acting like Brandon Staley doesn't have success as a coach when, in fact, he does. He's actually only been a defensive coordinator once, and that was for the Rams in 2020. And they finished with the #1 defense in all of football. A lot of people like to point toward his tenure with the Chargers as the head coach, but let's remember that being a head coach and being a defensive coordinator are two very different things. If you're a head coach, you've got to be the CEO of the defense. Robert Saleh, of the defense and the offense, of the whole team. Robert Saleh was the head coach of the Jets. Obviously, that didn't go as well as his 49ers tenure as defensive coordinator. So just because the Los Angeles Chargers defense wasn't great when Brandon Staley was the head coach there doesn't mean that he's a bad play caller. You have to look at the data points of him focusing on the play calling, which would be more of the role that he would take on with the 49ers. If he was the defensive coordinator there, you have to look at those data points to be a little bit more informed as to how he might do in the future. Still, even though Staley has been the internal candidate who's gotten, well, the one that we know of that's gotten the chance at this 49ers defensive coordinator position, that doesn't mean that he is in the driver's seat to get this job. The way it's looking right now, just from the outside, is if Robert Saleh is hired as a head coach elsewhere, that is when Brandon Staley might emerge as the 49ers leader in the clubhouse to become the defensive coordinator. But I still think that they're very zeroed in on Robert Saleh. I did talk about Dennis Allen earlier, but they didn't interview him. And Dennis Allen also seemed like he might be somebody that the 49ers only do interview if Robert Saleh is hired to be a head coach elsewhere, because we don't and haven't expected Dennis Allen to be a head coaching candidate. He's now been fired from 2 head coaching jobs. Expected Allen to go back to that defensive coordinator role. So that's the coaching carousel on this morning after the divisional playoffs. NFC and AFC championship games are set for Sunday, and I am ready to answer some of your 49ers questions. Let's get after it. Beautiful Monday afternoon. Do we have Rams fans in the stats? Got somebody pointing out that Matthew Stafford is 1-8 in snow games. I mean, Matthew Stafford came up in Georgia. You don't play a whole lot of snow games. Then he played in the Dome in Detroit, and now he's playing in a covered stadium in LA. So it's not like that wet weather, cold weather situation is his specialty. My stance on snow and rain games is that it's not necessarily representative of who the better football player or team is. But sometimes you got to be ready to play in those conditions. And Brock Purdy gets some slack for the inefficiencies in rain and snow games, but he's actually played a couple of his finest moments during rain games. The playoff opener against the Seattle Seahawks, his first ever playoff game in the 2022 season, was a rain game. And so was the playoff opener in the 2023 season against the Green Bay Packers. That was a rain game, and Brock Purdy in the rain delivered the winning touchdown drive. So people arguing about Matthew Stafford and saying that he hasn't been good in wet conditions. There's hardly a quarterback to exist that's, I don't think any quarterback ever, let's put that out there right now, has been as efficient in wet weather as he has been in dry weather. The gap is usually fairly large. I think one of the few quarterbacks for whom that gap is not that big is Josh Allen, because he's built like a howitzer, so he can deal with that wet weather. And it's a good thing that he's Buffalo's quarterback for that reason. But most other guys are going to struggle in the wet weather. Matthew Stafford, 1-8 in those snow games. He is one of them. The fact that, if we're going to bring this back to Brock Purdy, since we're talking about the 49ers, the fact that Purdy has 2 of his big playoff wins, 2 of his 4 playoff wins coming in wet weather, I think is very, very notable, very significant. Because yes, the chances that you will run into adverse conditions in the months of January and February are greater than the chances that you are going to run into adverse conditions later in the season. I just think that a lot of people are enjoying and relishing in the Rams' defeat yesterday. I thought Stafford played a good game, though, in the snow. I mean, he didn't throw the perfect pass on that 4th down. He sailed it out of bounds. And did the conditions have something to do with that? Sure. But he also threw for 324 yards in the snow. I think the main reason that the Rams lost that football game was the Kyron Williams fumble. That was huge. And the run defense. They couldn't stop Saquon Barkley. The Eagles were just a better team. Matthew Stafford did what he could to keep the Rams in the game given the conditions, but Philadelphia was stronger overall, and that showed in the snow back east. And now the Rams season is over. Will I stop living in the past with Brock? Why would I be living in the past? He's the quarterback of the future. They're about to give him a contract that's going to be at least 5 years long that might set NFL records. He is the past, present, and future of the 49ers right now. So just because I'm talking about Purdy doesn't mean I'm talking about the past. Pedro, it might upset you, but the truth is that Brock Purdy is the future. So when I'm talking about Brock Purdy, I'm talking about the future of the 49ers. And this also might upset you, but the past indicates that the future with Brock Purdy is a bright one. And I'm going to continue talking about him because he's the centerpiece of the 49ers. And because people like you do not recognize when good quarterback play is on the table for the football team. So we're going to continue talking about Brock Purdy, the future of the 49ers. This also isn't true. Only losing organizations make a player the highest paid player in the league who isn't the best player in the league. The 49ers, a very winning organization, made Jimmy Garoppolo the highest paid player in the league in 2017. He wasn't the best player in the league, but it was still a good contract. And they went on to make either the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl or both in 4 of 5 seasons after giving out that contract. How about that? A winning organization gave Jimmy Garoppolo, was a good quarterback for the 49ers. He wasn't the best quarterback in the league, the highest paying contract in the NFL, and it worked out. And it was a good deal. It was a good contract for the 49ers. They got good quarterback play out of Jimmy Garoppolo. So please stop with the ignorant takes. They're going to pay Brock Purdy. It will be worth it, and it will be a good move when they do make it. Anybody who knows the game, who knows football, understands this. People who are casuals don't, but it's not my responsibility to think for casuals. All I can do is put out the facts, and the facts are the facts. Brock Purdy is going to get paid a lot of money, and it won't be a bad deal for the 49ers. Who are the 49ers going to draft with the first pick? Who do you guys want the 49ers to draft with the first pick? They're going to pick number 11. I don't know who's going to be on the table still. Yeah, there's a chance that Tyler Warren is available at number 11. That is the tight end out of Penn State. I think he'd be a perfect fit for the 49ers. Do I think that do I know for sure that he's going to be there? No, I don't know how the draft is going to shake out. We never do, which is why I usually advocate for best player available. I know some people are saying take a tackle no matter what, even if he doesn't exactly fit your specifications. I think you're starting to play a dangerous game if you do that. I think that the 49ers need to make sure that whoever they do pick, even if they start getting a little bit more positional with this, since they are picking higher at number 11, they do need to absolutely make sure that that player is going to be a system fit for them. You've got to respect the integrity of the system above all else, because the system has generated a lot of success for San Francisco, and you just need to keep guys healthy and nudge it over the top at this point. Ken asks, what's the news on the defensive coordinator? Well, I started this show a little while ago. We went through the news. The 49ers remain zeroed in on Robert Saleh, but the coaching carousel has begun spinning. Ben Johnson to the Bears. The Saints and the Jets are both interested in his counterpart on the Lions, the defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn. The Jacksonville Jaguars are still interested in Robert Saleh, who is the 49ers' top choice to be the defensive coordinator. So we have to keep an eye on Jacksonville, since Saleh has already coached there in the past. Robert Saleh was the linebackers coach for Jacksonville before he became the defensive coordinator of the 49ers. That was under Gus Bradley. So he's got some organizational ties in North Florida. The Titans, by the way, I'm in Nashville right now. They're hiring John Fossil as their special teams coordinator. That is a big, big hire for Brian Callahan, an embattled coach in his first year. Didn't seem happy with the media on more than one occasion for the Titans. They weren't any good. They ended up being the number one pick. John Fossil was the special teams coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. I mentioned him as a big swing kind of name, potentially for the 49ers. I don't think they interviewed him either. I think more than anything for San Francisco, when we talk about the special teams coordinator position, regardless of who they hire, Kyle Shanahan needs to increase and it's hard to increase something that's subconscious. I wanted to say the subconscious focus on special teams, but there's just got to be a greater organizational attitude focus on special teams for the 49ers. You can't be broadcasting this energy that you only want special teams to not screw things up. You're going to need to encourage special teams to go out there and win some games for a change. Because Brian Schneider, who they just fired, was a really good special teams coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. So the fact that he didn't get the same results, nearly the same results, it was totally, hey, this is how I knew that stuff might be troublesome with Brian Schneider. 49ers bring him in 2022. And in week 2, they play the Seattle Seahawks. That was the home opener. And the Seahawks kept that game close, and they prevented a shutout. The 49ers would have won that game 27-0 with a blocked field goal returned for a touchdown. That was Brian Schneider's second game as 49ers special teams coordinator. And immediately, the team that he used to coordinate, that used to torment the 49ers on special teams, the Seattle Seahawks, returned a blocked field goal for a touchdown against San Francisco. So it didn't matter which team Brian Schneider was coordinating for. The 49ers were the ones that were sucking on special teams. So that told me, okay, wait, this is a sign that organizationally, the 49ers need to take this more seriously. Now, in 2022, they finished number 15 on special teams, so it wasn't terrible. It was an improvement over number 26 in 2021. But then it slid to number 26 in 2023 and further down to number 32 in 2024. So Brian Schneider was fired, and it's got to be a bigger organizational commitment for the 49ers. More questions. I'm going to go back into that comment section right now. There's your look at the roster in case you want to take a look at this and see the coaching interviews, which I'm listing down there on the bottom left. I'm going to toss that into the chat section. Let's go with the questions. Don't make me destroy any more trolls. I'm happy to do it, but don't make me do it because it's annoying after a certain point of time. Do I think that Matt Eberflus is a good candidate for DC? Well, he runs a 3-4. It's a good question. Dennis Allen, also a 4-3 guy. Eberflus, head coaching experience, like Allen, like Robert Saleh at this point. He checks the box of experience. I do know that the 49ers were impressed with obviously with Robert Saleh when he was their own coordinator, but they're impressed with Dennis Allen when they played the New Orleans Saints in 2022. And they struggled to move the ball in that game, struggled to score points against the Saints. And he's a really good third down and red zone defensive coordinator. So I know that appealed to Kyle Shanahan. Look at the history of playing against Matt Eberflus. In 2021, the Colts came in, and it was a big rainy Sunday night game at Levi's Stadium. And the Colts put the clamps down on the 49ers for the vast majority of that game. That was an Eberflus defense. Then in 2022, season opener at Chicago, that was Trey Lance's, it wasn't his first game as a starter, but it was the first game as the QB1. He was named the starter to begin that season. Wasn't just filling in anymore. 49ers ran into a ton of problems offensively against the Bears, although many would attribute those problems more to Trey Lance making his first career start and the absolute downpour. They were playing in Lake Michigan in Chicago on that day, then to the Bears defense and Matt Eberflus. But he has had 2 successful games against Kyle Shanahan, and games like that tend to get noticed if Shanahan was impressed with what Eberflus was doing schematically. Remember that anytime that you play a coach, so if it's Shanahan preparing for a coordinator, you watch a ton of their tape to get ready. And in the case of the 2020 2 Chicago Bears, Kyle Shanahan probably watched all of the 2021 Indianapolis Colts because that's where Eberflus was the defensive coordinator prior to that to get a feel for what he might face schematically. So if Shanahan liked what he saw from Eberflus, he's probably going to get an interview if Robert Saleh and the 49ers don't have a handshake deal. I think all indications right now still point toward Robert Saleh and the backup plan, Brandon Staley. We're just spitballing based on what's publicly available. But Robert Saleh has interviewed with the 49ers. He has been described as the favorite for this San Francisco defensive coordinator job. And the other experienced DC candidates are interviewing and signing with other teams. They have not reportedly interviewed with the 49ers. John Fossil to the Tennessee Titans. I do not believe, yes, Charlie, I do not believe that Robert Saleh has another interview set up at the moment. It's been 3 head coaching interviews for the time being. Post your questions. This is a good question. How difficult is it for a team not in a rebuild to totally switch schemes? I think it's difficult for any team, even if you are in a rebuild, to switch schemes, because I get it. Maybe it's less noticeable if you're in a rebuild because you're bringing in so many new players, but you're still changing the way that you do things in the building, and a coach is still implementing things. But I understand if you're not in a full-on rebuild, you're saying that you don't want a team to change gears in such circumstances. I don't think that the 49ers would be able to field a defense that starts looking like the best version of itself until at least the back half of the season if they were to change schemes entirely. I don't think it would be realistic to expect anything quicker than that, which is why I think that they want to generally keep a lot of what has been working, but they want to add the wrinkles that give them more adaptability and more strength to counter teams and their moves over the back half of games. If you watch Steve Spagnuolo with the Chiefs, and I know we've talked a lot about the officiating in that game, and everything that I've said about that still stands, but we do have to give credit where it's due. And for the Chiefs, it's been mainly on the defensive side of the ball this year. Spagnuolo saved his very best for last, and he did that against the 49ers in the Super Bowl. But the Texans had no answers to some of the heavy pressure that was coming their way in the fourth quarter. They just stopped CJ Stroud in the offense cold with some of the blitzes. And that's where Steve Spagnuolo is so good. And that's what the 49ers are looking for out of their next defensive coordinator. I think they're looking for somebody who doesn't necessarily live on the blitz, but somebody who can rely on it in opportune times, in times where not just opportune times, times when it's needed, times when you need to shake something up. I think Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich showed that over their few years with the New York Jets. And I think that the 49ers are very interested in going the Saleh route for that. I think Brandon Staley has blitzed when he's needed to as defensive coordinator back with the Rams in 2020. And I don't think that an entire scheme change is necessary to implement the wrinkles that the 49ers want to add to their defensive scheme. Who do I have in the national championship tonight? And don't say that you don't know. Pick somebody. Well, I haven't done any research, so I honestly don't know. I watch college football casually. I'm watching for the prospects, not really for the teams. I think Ohio State has been playing better football, and I think this is a hot team kind of thing. So I'm going to pick Ohio State. But again, that's coming from a place of not really handicapping the matchup. Just watching very, very casually. And I'm looking for prospects in these games. And then I start watching tape of the prospects. And then I make my mock draft. And I do everything that I have to do between now and late April when the 49ers are scheduled to pick at number 11. Doesn't Notre Dame normally know how to develop elite O-linemen? Well, elite in the college level or elite at the pro level? Because they developed Mike McGlinchey I don't think he was an elite lineman at the pro level. Was a good. There's a difference between college and NFL, and there's a projection that you have to make. There have been good guys, really good linemen that come out of Notre Dame. Quentin Nelson also came out of Notre Dame. He was there at the same time as Mike McGlinchey. So I think, big time college programs develop big time players at all positions. Notre Dame, yes, there is some pedigree there for the offensive line, but you've got to evaluate this on a player by player basis. When is the earliest you believe we'll get an update about the defensive coordinator hire? I think it's possible this week, but it could also take a little bit longer. But if Robert Saleh is not going to be hired to be the head coach anywhere, and these teams are going to want to solve their head coaching hires sooner rather than later, then as soon as that game of musical chairs stops and Robert Saleh knows that he's not getting a head coaching spot, or the 49ers know that Robert Saleh is getting a head coaching spot, is when they can move on with their lives at defensive coordinator. I think it's as simple as that. I think it's as simple as waiting for Saleh so you know if your first choice is going to be available or not, or at least wait for him to go through those motions. Even if you know he's going to be available, he's not going to be able to formally sign, and you're not going to be able to formally announce anything until that time comes. Dakota wants a show regarding how the guys the 49ers lost did this year. Well, I could talk a little bit about that. I don't think Jared Kingston played a single snap over in Carolina, at least up through week 15. He hadn't. Samuel Womack had a nice season for the Colts. That was a tough loss for the 49ers. Cody Schrader didn't play for the Rams, so they didn't really miss him. Eric Armstead was I think middling to solid for Jacksonville. I'll have to watch some of the tape of Jacksonville. I have a lot of time on flights and stuff over the offseason. I start to dive into those kinds of rabbit holes. 49ers missed Charlie Werner. I don't care what he did or didn't do with the Falcons, but I was watching tape of the NFC Championship game win over the Lions last year. You know, the Christian McCaffrey run that basically sealed that game. I know Elijah Mitchell took it in right after that, but it was the Christian McCaffrey. I think it was actually a pass from Purdy. It might have been a lot of yak from McCaffrey on a little short pass. Either way, it was Christian rumbling down the sideline. Charlie Werner was one of the blockers out in front of Christian, and he laid a really good block. And it just made me realize the 49ers depended heavily last year on Charlie Werner's blocking presence, and I don't think they quite were able to replicate that in 2024. And Javon Kinlaw, solid with the Jets this year. I think that he took another step forward as a pass rusher, but obviously not a player that the 49ers had in their budget to keep beyond his rookie contract. But we can get into a deeper show about this. Well, I can make a graphic of how they rated with their new teams, put up some stats if you would like, but I figured I'd do you the respect to answer your question just peripherally to begin. Where's Margot? Margot's at Costco right now, eating some samples, I'm sure. She went over to Costco and I said, hey, I'm going to do a show. Margot, she can be on camera, for a finite amount of time before she says, okay, I need a little bit of a break. I'll come back on next week. We got some really good travels planned in the next couple of weeks, so I'm very excited about that. Here's Margot. Speaking of that, just like open my phone. You can see that is very whitewashed. You can't even see the colors on there, but that's Margot. That's a wedding picture on the phone. I wanted to see if she was asking a question because my phone vibrated, but it wasn't her. From Costco, but that's where she's at right now, and she'll be back on the show at some point soon. Look at Bill coming through. Bill, you're awesome. Thanks, Bill. Hi, Bill. He says, hey, Dave. The top 2 free agents of the 49ers should target. Ooh, I was about to do a free agency show. I'll give you the top 1 right now. I know that you put $2 down there, so you probably want 2, but this is going to be a $2 answer. Drew Dahlman. And if not him, I think that answer needs to be representative of who the 49ers sign. I think a center is somebody the 49ers should sign. They need to sign a center, a veteran center to improve that position. Jake Brendel has been declining for the 49ers. I think that could be a rising tide that lifts all boats. I mean, Drew's got the pedigree. He went to Stanford, which is nice, but his dad, who also went to Stanford, Chris Dahlman, was the center of the 49ers back when Steve Young was around. Drew Dahlman can move. 49ers need a center who can move, and they need somebody who's cerebral enough to handle Kyle Shanahan's system. Well, we know he's smart. He went to Stanford, but you know what else? He succeeded Alex Mack in Atlanta. And Alex Mack, well, that's the Shanahan center who could cerebrally handle the position. So I think the fact that Drew Dahlman it was Alex Mack, Matt Hennessy, and then Drew Dahlman. So I would hope that some knowledge was passed down from generation of center to generation of center. You would hope that Drew Dahlman can embrace the 49ers scheme and give them an upgrade at that center position. That would be my recommendation for San Francisco as far as the signing goes. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. Demo trying to recruit Max Crosby. The problem is that Crosby is still under contract with the Raiders. And Mark Davis has shown no interest in trading good players to the 49ers. The 49ers tried to trade for Khalil Mack back in 2018. They offered more to the Raiders than the Chicago Bears did for Khalil Mack. And Mark Davis said, no, I'd rather trade him for less to the Chicago Bears. So unless something has changed with Mark Davis and his outlook of dealing with the 49ers, I don't think you're going to be able to get your hands on Max Crosby, at least this season. He's entering the final year of his contract with the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, maybe something did change when the Raiders moved to Vegas, because now they're not trying to win over the Bay Area market against the 49ers, but I don't think so. I think this is a pride thing that goes back to the era of Al Davis. That's obviously Mark's dad. And in the past, he's been unwilling to trade with the 49ers, at least for a player of Crosby's caliber. Or I think Crosby's in the caliber of Khalil Mack. He's one of the best edge rushers in the game. And because of that, I would not hold my breath. I think if Joey Bosa was coming to the Niners, he would have done so before he re-signed with the Chargers. And now Jim Harbaugh's with the Chargers. There's new life there. They made it back to the playoffs this year. It seems to be an ascending stock. I know Justin Herbert has his limitations. They'd be better with Brock Purdy as their quarterback in LA, but they still have a lot of good players and they have a good coach. And I don't think Herbert's a bad quarterback either. I just don't think he's Purdy. But the Chargers aren't in fire sale mode, and Bosa, he did restructure his contract there. I think he's got one more year left. It would also take the Chargers deciding to move on from him, even though they made a lot of progress. They gave up the fewest points in all football this year. So I don't see Joey Bosa getting Nick Bosa as his teammate this next year. I am waiting for more questions. Let's have some good ones. Brian loves the studio. Thanks. Margot helped set it up. She's done a great job with this. We got a cool background that is a signed Frank Gore jersey. Speaking of the Raiders, that's a signed Shane Leckler jersey, one of the great punters of all time. And we got Rudy Rudiger right here. There was a time when I had Rudy Rudiger in the background. That is like Rudy from Notre Dame. Signed Rudy jersey. You can't see it. There actually was a photo yesterday, though, that this is fun. You'll be able to see part of the Rudy Rudiger jersey. So, you guys were on the show last night. Margot was part of it. And she kept on talking about the chocolate cake that she wanted to eat. Well, I took a picture and tweeted it out right after to give all of you loyal viewers the update. As soon as we got done recording, That's Lombardi herself eating her chocolate cake and having it and eating it too, or do you eat it and have it too, right? Whatever I put the caption on Twitter. I'm having a bit of a brain freeze right now. She's having her cake and eating it too. So take a look at the studio right now. This is what it looks like coming from the camera. This is what it looks like because the camera's on the left side of this frame. So that's Lombardi herself eating the cake in the studio that she built. This is the house that Lombardi herself built. Just like Babe Ruth built Yankee Stadium, Barry Bonds built the ballpark on the waterfront in San Francisco, Margot Lombardi built this house. We are in the studio that Lombardi herself built and eats chocolate in. There it is. Credit to her. Thanks to Michael Lieberman, cool guy. He's helping us out too. Appreciate you, Michael. Hope everything is well with you. Brian asks, did they replace Brendel or McKivitz? Well, I think they might replace Brendel. I don't think it's unlikely that they replace McKivitz, at least for week one, unless they go really high in the draft on a tackle that starts immediately. But they've got McKivitz at decent value. He was like middle of the pack as a right tackle this year. He improved significantly with Dominic Pooney next to him at right guard. Drill this into your heads. The weak links on the 49ers offensive line this year were not on the right side of the line like they were in 2023. The weak links shifted over toward the left. It was center and left guard. Jake Brendel and Aaron Banks performed the worst on that line. So that's where the 49ers have to focus on getting better in 2025. Oh, somebody went to Fambrini's. Awesome. It's one of the best sandwiches there is in the Bay Area. Hope you said hi to them. If the owners were there, hope you say hi to them. Nick is the guy. He's got the beard, white hair. Awesome dude. But if you didn't, then go back and say hi to them. And if you do go to Fambrini's in Palo Alto again, get the chimichurri surf and turf. Joe says that Nick Bosa cannot play linebacker. In a 3-4, he would not play linebacker. You either put him at down defensive end, and he's still rushing the passer, or if he's technically an outside linebacker, he would still be rushing the passer. Back to our roster. This is for 2025. It is a 4-3 roster. And I do not expect the 49ers to move to a 3-4. But if they did, it wouldn't be a pure linebacker. It wouldn't be a stack linebacker position for Nick Bosa. Can the 49ers fix special teams in just one off season? I think so. I think there's so much player turnover year after year, especially at the depth positions. And they've got good special teams players. They have George Odom, who's been a leading tackler in the league on special teams more than once. It's like a special teams all-pro. It's one of those things where there just has to be that organizational commitment. You know, when I talk about special teams not wanting it to win games instead of just not losing games, run a fake punt, right? Like execute some trickery on a kick return. Do something that moves the needle on special teams in an aggressive fashion. I think that's what's really important. I think that goes back to the head coach. I think that goes back to Kyle Shanahan. I think that's the fix more than the specific coordinator to hire, because I cannot repeat enough that Brian Schneider delivered good results over his decade with Seattle. And then the results with the 49ers over his 3 years were not good. So the one variable that changed was not Brian Schneider. He was the special teams coordinator both times. The variable that changed was the team for whom he was coordinating. And the Seahawks in the 2010s had a good roster. So did the 49ers in the 2020s. So that variable didn't change either. You had good rosters in both spots. The one thing that changed was the organizational focus on special teams. I think that's the one variable you can and you have to change if you're San Francisco. Look, we got Tyler Warren questions. Any chance the 49ers can draft a Penn State tight end in the first round? Maybe. We'll see. Tyler Warren, he's a stud. I think he's got 49ers written all over him. You go back to these videos if they do draft him. Saw Penn State play a few weeks ago. My buddy Elliot talking a lot about Tyler Warren. And he texted me like 2 months ago. He's a Big Ten fan. He went to Indiana. Elliot did. It's like 44 on Penn State. Check him out. He's got 49ers written all over him. So I turn on a Penn State game. I'm like, oh, yeah. This guy's 6'6", 261. He moves like he's 240. Can catch the ball, can run routes, can block. Yeah, that looks like a 49er through and through. They need that tight end 2 position. Somebody asked me about Charlie Warner a little bit earlier. That was an underrated loss for the 49ers moving from 2022 or 2023 to 2024. If the Niners come to Germany, will there also be a Lombardi meeting? Yes, there will be. Did you know that the Lombards, after whom I am named, like Lombardi is just plural Italian for the Lombards. Lombards is in English, are from Germany. It was the Lombards. It was an invading tribe. When the Roman Empire was falling, you had the Germanic peoples. They called them barbarians. They came from the north and they helped sack Rome. They helped take over, especially the areas of northern Italy. It wasn't northern Italy there. Yeah, it was the Northern Roman Empire. It was taken over by the Lombards, which is why a state or a province of Italy is called Lombardia. It's actually the wealthiest province of Italy. It's where Milan is on the north side. And the Lombards were called the Lombards because it meant the long bearded ones. I used to have a longer beard back when I sacked Rome, but I don't anymore. I shaved in the 2,000 years since then. But anyway, that whole region of Germany used to belong to the Lombardis, technically. So yeah, I'll be there. I also have the story about Germany when I was 2 years old because I'm half Czech. My mom is from the Czech Republic. 1990, I'm 2 years old. We went to Berlin. It was actually on the trip that I got baptized. I got baptized in Copenhagen, Denmark. So we went from Prague up to Denmark, and I helped take down the Berlin Wall as a 2-year-old. I got a little piece of the Berlin Wall. I showed it on a show last week when it was announced that there was going to be a game in Berlin. So anyway, if the 49ers are scheduled for a game in Berlin, we are going to, I don't know if I'm going to take a piece of the Berlin Wall with me, but we'll show it off on the show again. And I'm definitely going to go to Berlin. Yeah, I might be a barbarian, technically. I'm descended from barbarians, right? The Lombards. The barbarians. That's what the Romans called them. But Rome eventually fell. All these great civilizations eventually fell. I'm ready for more questions, guys. Let's go. There haven't been any questions here in a little bit. Did the Lombardis really start in Sweden? Somebody's saying that they migrated initially from Sweden to northern Germany, and then they went down and took over northern Italy. That'd be epic. That'd mean I would have roots in all of Europe. We might as well have the 49ers NFL international game in Stockholm if that was the case. This would be cool. Imagine if they played in Germany during Oktoberfest. That would be epic. Now, one thing, though, is that Oktoberfest is centered in Munich, not Berlin. Munich is like the Marina District of Germany. Berlin is like the Mission of Germany. Berlin's a little bit more hipster, a little more grungy. Anyway, the Oktoberfest that you see, I'm sure they celebrated everywhere to some extent, but it's centered on Munich. It's a little bit, that country, just like all countries in Europe, seem and even the US, very regionalized, right? So remember, this game is going to be in Berlin and not Munich. Chris asks if there's more of a chance of the 49ers playing in Mexico this year. I'm not sure. So the 49ers have the marketing partnerships in two countries, in the UK and in Mexico. There is a Mexico City game. We don't know who's going to be playing in that game yet. The 49ers would be one of the candidates to play in that game, potentially against a team like Houston, who I believe is on the schedule next year. But they can also play in the UK because that's where the Cleveland Browns are hosting a game. I think it's the Browns, right? There are two teams in the AFC North who host games in Berlin and in Munich who are on the 49ers schedule. No, it's not. No, it's not only AFC North. I forgot who the second team is that's hosting a game. But anyway, teams on the 49ers schedule are hosting games in Munich. In London, UK game, and in Berlin. And then there's a potential of a game in Mexico City. So there are possibilities of the 49ers to play in either of those three cities. We just don't know yet. They've got that marketing deal for the UK where they also own the soccer team. They own Leeds United, and they have one in Mexico. So perhaps those two countries would be more likely than Berlin. But the 49ers do have a history of playing in Berlin. After the Berlin Wall was fully down in 1991, the 49ers played the Chicago Bears, and Jim Harbaugh was the Bears quarterback at the Olympic Stadium in Berlin. So, and it was Joe Montana and Steve Young on the other side. So there is history of that. So I wouldn't rule it completely out. What's the longest the 49ers are willing to wait? Well, I find it hard to believe that the 49ers wouldn't be willing to wait longer than the Jaguars for a defensive coordinator while Jacksonville is waiting for a head coach. Does that make sense? The hiring decision for Jacksonville is higher up the food chain and more consequential than the hiring decision for the 49ers. So naturally, you would expect that Jacksonville will resolve its head coaching search before the 49ers lose their patience with Robert Saleh or that entire situation. And I think that, listen, it doesn't happen very often where teams are without a head coach far into February. I think this is going to be resolved in January. I think the first domino has fallen, so we're probably going to hear more news. Ben Johnson is now the head coach, or will become the head coach of the Chicago Bears. That was the first part of this update. The offensive coordinator of the Lions going to the Bears. How are the Lions going to replace Ben Johnson? That's a big question for a team that was pretty reliant on him as the offensive coordinator. Then there are the Saints and the Jets. They're both interested in Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. The Jags still interested in Saleh, so we've got to keep an eye on that. The question, I think, related to that. But Dennis Allen off the table because he's going to be Ben Johnson's defensive coordinator with Chicago. Lou Anarumo, meanwhile, will be headed to Indianapolis to work under Shane Steichen. It all adds up to the 49ers still being very, very interested or very zeroed in on Robert Saleh. A couple more questions, and then we'll be on our way. Another super chat. Let's see. Name any Niner, former or current, that you would vacation with, and where would you go? Oh, gosh. This is a tough question. Putting me on the spot. We got more news on Robert Saleh, by the way. I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm thinking about the answer for this. Mike just sent me something from Jeremy Fowler. Any Niner, former or current? Man. All right, we're going to get back to this. I'm thinking about who'd be the most fun to vacation with and where would we go. If you guys have ideas, toss them into the comment section. I want to give a good answer, though. We're going to return to that in a second. We have a little bit more news on Robert Saleh, though. Jeremy Fowler reports that Robert Saleh has a second interview with Jacksonville scheduled for Friday. Saleh acquitted himself well in the first interview and gets a longer look now. So this is not new as far as Jacksonville's interest. We knew that Jacksonville was impressed with him. We know that he has organizational ties there, but substance-wise, he is getting that second interview, and we have a date for it. It is Friday. So if the 49ers are going to remain zeroed in on Robert Saleh, this is going to take at least through the end of the week and probably a little bit longer than that, since, again, that's not happening until Friday. So buckle your seatbelts. The ride is just beginning. Saleh and the Jaguars, second interview. He used to be the linebackers coach there. We're going to wait for more beyond that. Rob says that Brandon Staley is how Kyle gets himself fired. You don't know that. I mean, the thing is, the Staley stuff is, again, it's such an overreaction based on his tenure as the head coach of the Chargers, but the 49ers are not interviewing Staley to be a head coach. The 49ers are interviewing him to be a defensive coordinator. I don't even think he's the favorite for the role. As a purely defensive coordinator, he hadn't had bad results. The Rams finished number 1 in total defense in 2020. So there is this antipathy toward Brandon Staley that is a little too based on his head coaching track record and not on his DC track record. Mike thinks that the 49ers should start interviewing more defensive coordinator candidates this week, just in case Robert Saleh is indeed hired by Jacksonville. We shall see. That is the update, though, on Saleh. We got one literally during the course of this show. So now we need to go back to this question. I'm still trying to figure out the answer. What do we think? Any Niner, former or current, that I would have vacation with, and where would we go? Somebody says Nick Bosa hunting. That would be cool. Kittle would be fun. Yeah, George Kittle would be a lot of fun. I'm looking for, a big personality. If you're going to go vacation, you're probably going to be extroverted. You're out there. You're not just sitting at home. So we're looking big personality. We're going to go with George Kittle. I think that's a good one. This is not an excuse for Brandon Staley. This is just the reason. You said Saleh's Jets defense always had a good defense, though. What was Staley's excuse with the Chargers? It's not an excuse. It's a reason. He just wasn't a good head coach. It was just too much for him. For whatever reason, it was just too much for him with the Chargers. So he wasn't able to, with juggling everything he needed to juggle as that coach, he wasn't able to give the defense the quality coaching that he did when he was focused on it with the Rams. Somebody like Robert Saleh might have been a better head coach with the Jets. He had obviously other things that didn't go right. But I think that it's just so important to classify this separately. Head coach is such a different job than defensive coordinator. And the quicker that we can accept that, the quicker that we could probably more fairly evaluate how somebody would be as a potential defensive coordinator instead of just a head coach. More question. Yeah, not everyone's built for it. This is I think this is the best, very simple answer. And also, Saleh did have Jeff Ulbrich, who got hired by the Atlanta Falcons to again be their defensive coordinator. Remember that Ulbrich had been with the Falcons before he went to the Jets, and now he's headed back to Atlanta. I don't see Richard Sherman doing any coaching. People are talking about him, but Richard is happy with his TV role, making more money that way too. We're going to get Richard on the show at some point. If you guys want Richard Sherman on the show, give me a thumbs up. We did get him on the show right before the Rams game. That was funny on the live. That was a good time. Yeah, if you want Richard Sherman on the show, let me know. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And we will go from there. I think that'd be a great next step. 49ers remain zeroed in on Robert Saleh. We'll see if they open up the interview process a little bit more, or if Brandon Staley is the only backup plan based on their actions this week, because Saleh has a second interview with Jacksonville now scheduled for Friday. The coaching carousel has begun, and it is related to what the 49ers are dealing with. Ben Johnson to the Bears. The Jets and the Saints are interested in Aaron Glenn. The Jags, of course, remain interested in Robert Saleh. Second interview coming. Dennis Allen expected to be Ben Johnson's DC in Chicago, and Lou Anarumo headed to the Indianapolis Colts. So it has sped up. It's getting busier, but our timeline on Robert Saleh seems to still have a few days to wait based on the fact he's going to have that second interview with Jacksonville on Friday. Everybody, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.